Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Saturday for those of you that are returning. Welcome back. And for those of you that are new, welcome to the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, episode number 11, The Striped Sweater. My name is Bill, and on today's show, we will talk about Delta passengers stranded in Canada, top gaming trends of 2024, and future anti-drunk driving car technology. Then we'll learn some industry terms with jargon in a jiffy, help you build a pathway to success with Career Corner, live listener Q&A, and our discussion this week, ugly Christmas sweaters. I'm sorry, TikTok, once again, just took an absolute dump. I love it. I just absolutely, what is this thing doing? I am so sorry, folks. Give me just a second. Oh, gotta love TikTok Live. Every time TikTok Live absolutely screws up the intro. But anyways, yeah, so we're learning industry terms this with jargon and jiffy, help you build a pathway to success with Career Corner, live listener Q&A, and our discussion this week, ugly Christmas sweaters. My co-host today is fellow co-founder of the Three Green Simulations Group, retired NYC EMT, and flight sim extraordinaire Tommy D of Level Flight Simulations. Tommy D, how you doing this morning, buddy?
Good morning, Bill. How are you? I am doing great. I've already got a sense of accomplishment today.
Oh, good. It must have not been after watching that intro because TikTok Live absolutely screwed it. Anyways.
TikTok Live just isn't being our friend lately.
No, it's not. I went to, I had everything set up pre-show, and I went to go switch from the intro panel to the live scene, and it's just blank. It was trying to show my notes, which was ridiculous. But anyways. So, you want to tell me about what do you mean? What productiveness did you have done today?
I was up at 6 o'clock this morning. I was able to hit the gym, the laundromat, fly a leg from LaGuardia to Raleigh, Durham.
Uh-huh.
And here I am.
You did that all this morning?
All this morning, yeah.
Wow. Normally Tommy D doesn't get up before like 2 p.m. That's really impressive.
Yeah. That is amazing things happen when I'm not at work the night before.
I am super impressed. Like I said, normally we have later days because Tommy starts a little bit later in the day. So Tommy, I am super impressed. Super impressed.
Thank you.
Okay.
How's your week been?
So it hasn't been too bad. It actually was pretty okay. The trip I had this week was pretty much almost the exact same one as I had last week. There were just a couple of small minute differences that I think you and I talked about as well. So it wasn't too bad. It was very monotonous, which is good. I always say, in my industry, monotony is perfect because that means things aren't falling off or going off hinges. But I think the main issue that I had this week, and I was telling you about because I was texting you throughout the week, is communications. The communications in general this week was rough between the cabin, between maintenance. It was just, there was a lot of miscommunication things that was a little frustrating, but we got through it though. We were professionals, so we got through it. But other than that, it's been a good week. And so right now, excuse me. Sorry, I've been drinking my hot cocoa this morning, got my sweater on. But with that being said, let's talk a little bit about some news this morning. We're starting off the aviation news segment with This Week in Aviation History. As you guys all know, I am a huge history geek, so I absolutely love aviation and history, because history is basically a way for us to learn from our past and hopefully not repeat history in the future. So this week in aviation is the 14th of December, 1903, here in the United States of America. Wilbur Wright makes the first and unsuccessful attempt at powered flight at Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. His aircraft stalls after 3.5 seconds in the air and crash lands 105 feet away. That's right. He didn't just show up on December 17th, which we'll talk about next week. I'll do a whole bit on December 17th and the birth of aviation. But he didn't just show up and first try, right, and did that, but that's not how it worked. So unfortunately, his first attempt, which was 3 days before the famous one, was only in the air for 3.5 seconds and crashed. So that's what happened this week in aviation back in 1903, about 20 years ago. Now, on to more recent news. This has been hitting the headlines all over the place, so I had to talk about it. Delta Airbus A330 diverts to Goose Bay, and airline sends two more to rescue passengers. This is from Simple Flying's writer Aaron Bailey. Delta Airlines Flight 135 was operating between Amsterdam and Detroit before diverting over Gaspé Bay due to a mechanical issue. The airline worked with local officials to arrange food and accommodations, and there were a total of 270 passengers or customers that were en route to Detroit. Now, initial reports have come that say the aircraft was diverted due to a defrosting issue. Now, defrosting is a very non-pilot term, so I'm assuming that the writer or whoever told the writer maybe it wasn't accurate. Defrosting, I'm thinking it's an anti-ice issue. Normally, if we do have an anti-ice issue in the aircraft, if we can't maintain flight outside of icing conditions, which, without getting too technical, is basically flying through a cloud and the temperature is below 10 degrees Celsius, then we have to divert. So it's possible that they weren't going to be able to maintain flight outside of icing conditions, and that's why they had to divert to Gas Bay. But this is a statement directly from Delta. It says Delta Flight 135, operating from Amsterdam to Detroit on December 10th, experienced a mechanical issue and diverted to Goose Bay, Newfoundland, Sunday afternoon out of an abundance of caution. Crew duty times have been impacted due to weather and runway conditions at Goose Bay Airport, causing the airport to suspend operations. Delta is sending an additional aircraft to Goose Bay to bring customers to their final destination later this morning. We apologize to the customers for this inconvenience as we continue to work to make them comfortable. Now, they did send out a second aircraft. They arrived with a pilot that was unable to operate the return flight, as they have also gone over the duty limit. So, for whatever reason, because of weather or such, getting out to the airport timed out the next pilot. And then the third and final Airbus A330 was sent out to Goose Bay from Detroit the following day on Monday, December 11th. In the morning. So those poor passengers were stranded in Goose Bay for about 24 hours. But it did say they moved into military barracks and stuff. So they took them off the airplane, but a majority of that was on the airplane. And it's an international flight. So arriving from somewhere outside of the United States, landed in another foreign country, Canada. So there was also obviously some customs issues and stuff they had to address before they got off the airplane, but they did move them to more comfortable, suitable accommodations, and the local town stuff was able to accommodate them before getting them on their flight to Detroit. Unfortunately, the article doesn't go through anything more about what's going on, but I'm pretty sure in the future we'll have updates, and I'll be sure to bring those to you, because obviously that's a big thing, being stuck on an airport and diverted to an airport for more than 24 hours. So that I honestly could not imagine something like that happening. I've never had anything like that happen to you. What about you, Tommy? Have you ever diverted into somewhere where you couldn't get out?
No, actually, I never did. And all the times I've flown, we never diverted because, I mean, if there was a medical issue and something that I could take care of on that aircraft to
Hmm.
keep us from diverting, let's go. I'm going on vacation.
Yeah, I'd be like,
But
I'm a
no,
medical personnel, right, Tommy?
yeah.
I'm like,
And
I'm medically trained.
what what blows my mind is, did they not know that the relief pilot was going to time out?
Well, yeah, there's always that question. Because, like, do you get on a flight knowing that you're not going to be able to do, especially if you know it's a rescue flight? What I'm thinking happens, this is pure speculation because I have no idea what actually happened with the pilot. They probably got him on board and he was going to be legal for the time, but I'm pretty sure they probably faced some sort of delay coming out of Detroit that was unforeseen, and that caused him to go over his duty time out to Goose Bay. So he was able to fly out but not fly back. They wouldn't have put him or her, whoever it was, on a flight, the pilot on the flight, if they weren't already planned to be legally fit for the whole thing. So it's most likely there was some sort of delay that was unforeseen due to operational circumstances, and they were able to get the rescue airplane out there, which is better than not having the plane out there. But then, yeah, you run into the problem of them not being legal to fly back. Unfortunately, I could imagine being a passenger though, being like, "Hey, there's a rescue plane. Oh no, the pilot timed out." I could understand. There was videos all over TikTok and stuff too, with people being upset about it.
Oh, I can
But like
imagine.
I mean, it's understandable because an airplane is not meant to, even the bigger ones, you're not supposed to spend any more than like 12 to 15 hours on them if you can, just because the facilities and stuff, and there's limited food and stuff like that. But what people have to also understand, you can't just divert into a foreign country and be like, all right, everybody get off the airplane. There's so many security and like immigration risks, because they're foreign people. It's just like if a foreign aircraft that was overflying the United States had to divert into a U.S. airport, they couldn't just deplane the airplane. Especially with, I don't even know if Goose Bay had um, customs there. I honestly, they may have had to call customs in, and that was the delay too. So when we divert in real life, there a lot of times it's divert to the nearest suitable airport, and nearest suitable has a bunch of different definitions depending on your situation. Um, I personally, if it was a de-ice issue and it wasn't going to be causing any sort of structural failure like a bleed air leak, which causes pressurization, or an overheat, which could burn up the inside of the wing, then I personally wouldn't. I would have picked an airport that has customs that's on the U.S. side, but weather permitting, because who knows that the weather could have been bad all across the northern United States, and then they had no choice to go into Canada. With the weather might have been the most restricting thing, but it's interesting that they chose Goose Bay, which is such a remote location, unless it was already an alternate built into their flight plan too. It's just there's so many different factors, but unfortunately, it ended up being a longer than a 24-hour ordeal, which kind of
Or
sucks.
unless it was something that we really need to land, and that airport had a suitable runway. Because at 3:30, you're
That's
not
true.
stopping on a dime.
No, and I mean, 330. It's depending on how light or heavy. It's around probably an 8,000 foot runway will do it. The longer runways are needed for takeoff when they're full of fuel. So yeah, but that's a serious consideration that they could have considered too. Is just the landing length, stuff like that. So I'm interested to see more information and reports from like the FAA and stuff if they do investigate it, to see why. Because I mean, that's a huge ordeal, having passengers stranded in a non-US airport for 22, 24, or 24 plus hours is kind of ridiculous. So, well, but that's all I got for right now for aviation news. And up next is going to be Tommy talking a little bit about some gaming news. So, Tommy, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Bill. So the first things that we're going to go with the gaming news is an article out of Forbes magazine, and it was really, really interesting that it came in Forbes. So the top 10 gaming trends of 2024. This is their prediction, right? Because we're already 2 weeks to the end of the year. Everything's winding down. Everybody's credit card shopping and all that. So Forbes went ahead with this generative AI in gaming, that we're going to see an increase in artificial intelligence in our gaming. Google Stadia, which is something new. It's not available yet, but they're hoping to launch in 2024. Microsoft Xbox Cloud Gaming, Amazon Netflix, NVIDIA, GE Force is going to be the driving factor for their graphics behind this. But gaming on demand is something that is being um, looked into, to where you'll be able to log on to your Netflix and be like, oh, I'm going to play Call of Duty. They didn't go too crazy about it, but it is downloadable content to go to devices that's console, PC friendly, probably going to be mobile friendly on the later on, and we'll see where that market is going to go. Esports and pro gaming. EA Sports has been doing this for since EA Sports has been around. They've been doing professional leagues. They were actually even on ESPN for a while there, but with FIFA and FIA, they'll have that. VR gaming will continue to grow. And we all know that. We see guys on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, with their VR headsets, or, full home setups for racing, driving, flying, all sorts of things. I'm waiting to see the guy who comes up with the full Modern Warfare thing. That would be kind of funny. The business side of things, as we all know, Microsoft bought Activision, and they finally released 70 billion. That was the price tag that came with that. And it's likely going to continue with the payments in 2024, because 70 billion is a pretty good chunk of change. Collaborative games are going to be looking to come out. They didn't go too fine into that. Minecraft and Roblox are the two where you can play collab games. Bigger, more immersive game worlds. They're looking for them to have more open map and bigger games. Web3 gaming, I don't know a whole lot about. I got to research that a little bit. So, and that's the gaming predictions from Forbes for now. The next bit of gaming news, I haven't done a big Microsoft Flight Sim update in a while, but this one was even exciting to me, even though everybody's favorite wide body of the Boeing fans, PMDG's 777-200. And as you can see, there it is on the top of the screen. Michael Randazzo, Chief of Development for PDMG, did release that today. I'm sorry, a couple days ago. Says testing is going immensely well, considering the size of the project that it is to bring everyone a wide body. The 200 and 300 are going to probably being tested concurrent. They are going to be going into beta in the foreseeable future. The update I got here, and feel free to go to it, is on msfsaddons.com. It's usually one of the forums that I use. They're pretty accurate and they're very, very quick. So PDMG released this and it lit up like the 4th of July sky. It's also on their forums. Comprehensive insight from Michael Randazzo offered looks, and there we see right there the flight deck. These are the two major pictures that were released along with it. Like I said, there's nowhere. This is all getting ready to go into beta testing, which means their testers are going to fly it. Now, PDMG, the Rolls Royce of payware aircraft, as far as my personal opinion is, they're going to be really meticulous about this. If it's going to release midway, end of 2024 is my humble prediction, because they're going to make sure that this thing is released with as few bugs as possible. So it's not a constant update to it. The 777 flies appropriately like a 777. I'm actually going to reach out to Mr. Randazzo on the PMDG forum, because he does answer. If you have any questions, you could actually go to their forums. He does answer himself in between working with PDMG and his flight schedule, because he is a commercial pilot. One of the things they're doing is PMDG side of the detailed work is just about complete, but now they got to get it to render in the Microsoft enhanced engine. And that's where they got to bridge everything so it runs smooth and all that. So that's why it's time consuming. They have to get the agreements going, and I'm sure there's a standing agreement between PMDG and, I don't know why I can't say that today, and Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I guess they renew them as time goes on. So as you can see, they definitely put the work into the flight deck. They put the work into the external model. Kind of looks like the old Eastern airline there, but that is the test model that's probably going to be flown. They're going to use the 200 variant as the basis of it. It will have the EFB in it, probably specific. And also, Mr. Randazzo had put out there, he always likes to leave these little Easter eggs. And as it turns out, he had made mention that he will be waiting in the hangar with eggnog ready to go. So it definitely points to maybe something more being released, a teaser or a trailer or something along those lines by Christmas, or maybe just after, the eggnog season. But I, for one, am not a long haul type of guy when I sim, but I really think this aircraft will be in my hangar, just because I am a fan of Boeing. I've been a fan of PMDG for a very long time. It's going to be a good aircraft. We don't have no idea what price it's going to be, but I would expect it to be around the $78, $80 mark, because it will be a study level wide body. So very, very exciting stuff. I have this bookmarked. We're going to be talking more about this aircraft in future episodes. It's going to be a good time. Good time flying this. So with that is my complete update.
I like that. Like I said, I don't fly the 737, but I am a huge fan, like Tommy, of the PMDG series. Tommy and I started off our streaming career doing shared flight deck stuff on the PMDG 737, which, as a real world 737 pilot, I can attest is highly accurate to the actual airplane. So I was able to literally show you all what I was able to, what I do for work, and also teach Tommy stuff from work while I'll not, violating the laws. I bring a GoPro with me in the cockpit. So, very thankful that PMDG comes out with airplanes like that, because it allows simmers like Tommy and I who want to take it seriously and to learn the actual how to fly the actual airplane. It takes everything to the next level.
Yeah, I'm actually excited for this. This and that Bluebird 7.5.
I would say the seven. I'm thinking I'll probably get the Bluebird 7.5. I don't. Or I guess I can get the 777 too. I don't know, because like real life, I don't think 777 isn't in Chicago anymore for my company, so I don't think I'll ever actually fly the 777. But the 7.5, I may. We'll see. So I'm definitely lined up more for the Bluebird 7.5. But if PMDG comes out with this and it's a reasonable price, I'd be down. Do some
Oh
do
yeah,
some on
but
call stuff with
but
Tommy.
they're not even in beta yet. That um one thing PMDG is infamous for is their beta testing is extensive. Months
It
and
takes a
months and
while.
months. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
we have a
and
little bit of time.
we do. And the funny thing is they actually use real type rated pilots on the
Man,
777 to beta it.
hey, PMDG, if you need somebody to do any testing for any new 7.3s, let me know. I got you.
Oh, they're probably gonna come out with that 7.3 Max Neo 24 eventually. So
Yeah, eventually. I mean, I'll do it for free. So that'd just be cool to be able to collaborate with somebody like that to help them build a model. But that'd be pretty cool. Yeah. And now here's the real question though, Tommy, for gaming, as the gaming expert on the show, do you think that this 777 or the 7.5 from Bluebird will come out before GTA 6? Because GTA
the
6 is
7.5
2025.
probably will. That's already been in development over a year and a half. They
Oh, okay.
should
Yeah.
be
So
at
that'll
the
definitely.
yeah. The only thing that Bluebird doesn't do very well is it doesn't they don't update very, very often.
Okay.
And but when they do, it is significant. But I can't imagine them having much beta testing to do. The Lunar Sim 763 just kind of fell
Yeah.
to the wayside. That was the freeware study level 763.
Okay.
So no idea what's going on with that. My email has not chirped with anything from them in months since I first brought it up. I think it was episode 2. But
Okay.
think this I think we might be playing GTA 6 before we see
Before.
PMDG's 777.
Okay. So Tommy's calling it now, folks. On here first on Torque and Thrust, we're predicting 7.5, right, from Bluebird first,
Yep.
then GTA 6, right, and
Hmm.
then the PMDG 7.777.
Yep. That's what
All
I'm
right,
thinking.
Tommy called it. We'll revisit that this episode in those future episodes when these things actually start to come out. So
Yes. Yes.
okay. Well, thank you, Tommy, for some good gaming news. Those were really good updates. Two things that we both love: Microsoft Flight Simulator, and also just gaming trends. See where things are going for the future year. Now, next up is going to be automotive news. Here, this week, it's coming from Motor Trend. We're going to be talking about the mandatory anti-drunk driving tech. The mandatory driving tech is coming, is the name of the article, and General Motors is ready. This is from Motor Trend article writer Alexander Stoklosa. I do apologize, Alexander, if I mispronounced that. But the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or the NHTSA, has, after years of voicing its intent, officially submitted an advance notice of proposed rulemaking surrounding anti-drunk driving technology. What a notice of proposed rulemaking is kind of the same thing that we have in aviation. It's just announcing to lawmakers and the public that they are intending to do something. So when they start gathering research and start proposing stuff, it's not a surprise to anybody. Alcohol-related vehicle crashes are among the leading cause of injury and death on American roadways, which have already seen a precipitous backsliding in terms of safety in recent years. In 2021 alone, drunk driving was responsible for 13,384 deaths, a significant chunk of the 42,939 per the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety traffic deaths overall that same year. So you're talking about a third. So about 33% of deaths in 2021 alone were caused by drunk driving. This document initiates rulemaking, and this is a quote directly from from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. This document initiates rulemaking that would gather the information necessary to develop performance requirements and require that new passenger motor vehicles be equipped with advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology through a new federal motor vehicle safety standard, or FMVSS. There is no telling right now what form these impairment detection devices will take, but it's a pretty safe bet that they'll be mandated in new passenger cars, trucks, and SUVs in the future. Cars today, for example, have the ability to detect drowsy drivers using eye tracking technology, smoothness of driving inputs, as well as lane departure warnings. For those that have previous DWIs or court ordered, they do have these breathalyzers that you can plug into your car, and you have to breathe or blow a safe amount on the breathalyzer in order to be able to drive or turn on the car. So an ignition lockout system. So there is a variety of different technologies that are coming our way to help prevent drunk driving. So in the article didn't really go into too much in terms of what the technology is. It's just mainly saying that the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, the NHTSA, has announced and given notice to rulemakers and to companies such as GM that they are going to be pursuing a new federal motor safety standards, as we mentioned in the article. And it did mention that GM there was ready, so some of the car companies knew this was coming, so they're already kind of starting to work towards that. And like I said, cars today already have the ability to detect impaired driving; they just haven't been federally mandated. So I don't, Tommy, this is actually probably a really good topic of discussion for the both of us, because impaired driving, I mean, in your career field, if you don't mind, you don't have to share specifics, but how many scenes have you gone to that were as a result of impaired driving?
Honestly, I
Hmm.
I gave up counting in the early 90s.
Okay, so
It,
it's
it's a
still a big
horrible
problem.
number.
Yeah, it's so. My question to you though is this something that you think? So obviously the numbers are going back up, right? 2021, a third of all
Hmm.
deaths, traffic deaths, were because of impaired driving. And what sucks, and I will say this, what sucks about impaired driving is that those people that died aren't necessarily the people that were impaired.
And they
It
rarely
could have
are.
it's always well, not always, it could be somebody else. So that's what gets me, and this is why I think, and that's why I'm presenting this article. I think something does need to be done, because drunk driving doesn't only affect the people that are the ones making the horrible decision to drink while drunk or to drive while drunk. It could drastically affect people who have absolutely no relation or have never met the person before. But my question is, do you think that these things, such as like the eye tracking for drowsy, and was it smoothness of inputs and lane departure, um, do you think that is a reactive step or a preventative? Because I feel like if you're out on the road and the car goes, "Oh wait, you're drunk," what is it going to do? Is it going to slam on the brakes or and stop the car, or
Well,
you know what I
that's
mean?
just it too. Is it going to be at some point that software is
Hmm.
going to be reactive because you physically got to be
Yep.
in the vehicle operating it in order for whatever the mechanism is or the parameters
Yeah.
is to possibly turn on the flashers,
Yep.
start slowing the vehicle. You know, you driving on 81, you're not going to be able to just slam on the brakes.
I mean, and they do have the technology though, right? Because they have auto emergency braking. That's what my wife's car has.
Mine
Um,
does too.
it
Nissan.
Yeah, and it has. That's true. Yeah, they're both Nissans, and also it has adaptive cruise control, so it can stop all the way up into traffic. It can even act. It can. What is it called? It can work in traffic, like stop and go traffic for, I think it's like 25 minutes without an input. So it'll stop and go. I haven't tested it because that scares the crap out of me. Um, but so the technology is there to safely slow somebody down and get them. I wouldn't say on the side of the road though. So, because like our car will freak out if we're getting anywhere near the lane, right? It'll turn off the autopilot if it thinks we're going outside of the lane. So I don't know if that technology is there, but I think we have the technology, like you said, to turn on the flashers, right, and to slowly deaccelerate the vehicle. But the problem is what if there's not a safe place for them to pull off? Um, and also, if there's no safe way to get them off the road, then you're just causing more of a traffic jam and risk to other people behind them, right? It's just like the same as if someone just slammed on their brakes in the middle of a busy freeway.
Right. Because people, you know, if you and I are headed to the Flight Sim Expo and this happens while we're in
Hmm.
Houston, actually, no, it's in Cincinnati, I think, or Cleveland. Cleveland.
Is it in
but
Cleveland? Ooh,
I believe it's in
that's
Cleveland.
right.
Yeah,
That's in between us. We might have to go.
we might have to, but we're not going to know what it is. If we're in a rental car coming out of Cleveland Airport and we
Hmm.
just see, all right, well, this is going to be a disabled motorist, and then when he opens up the door, a bottle falls out, on
Yeah.
for an extreme, so
Case. Yeah.
I agree. We do have the technology to do it. Um,
Or
but
do we want tattletale cars? I've read articles on this, and I can save it for another thing, not to get too deep into it. But they have the ability, just like OnStar, to send notification to law enforcement.
you know what? I'm all for it. If it's going
You
to
think so?
save a
Hmm.
life or a family from being ripped apart because someone was impaired in driving and
Hmm.
struck that vehicle, I'm all for it.
So
I have no problem with it.
would you now, because they would basically be using a lot of the same technology with drowsy driving, right? So that would be an alert, because I mean, the statistics are out there. Driving while tired is almost synonymous with driving while intoxicated. It's just as bad. That's why you're
Well,
not
sure.
supposed to drive when you're exhausted. So if the technology is basically detecting the same thing, would it warrant sending a notification to law enforcement if you're also driving? I guess it would fall under driving unsafe too, right? Like
Yeah,
if
it would
they're
be
driving
because if
jerkily.
if you're up for 24, 25 hours and you're driving, even if you're driving 5 miles home, you're tired.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you are.
you're going to be tired. And especially if you're driving at night, you go some of these interstates, there's nothing. There's the
No,
reflectors in the side of the road, and then every once in a while, the lights for the road signs. Get a trooper, get a local law enforcement official out there, pull them over. You know, absolutely. Duck off in
well,
the rest area, take a nap. You
well,
know,
and here's another thing. Snowy in our one of our live chats mentioned, one of our moderators, and it's a very good point. There's also the point of medical emergencies, right? Because we do have
absolutely.
people that have medical emergencies while driving. So the same technology could alert law enforcement and medical assistance when someone is having difficulty driving. So I mean, I agree with you, Tommy. If it prevents, if I'm like driving sleepily and lazily to the point where it triggers a law enforcement and ambulance response because I think I'm either impaired, sleepy, or I'm having a medical episode or a medical emergency, better safe than sorry. I feel like that's what that falls under.
Absolutely. Because for 3.5 years, I was a 911 dispatcher in Florida. Now, I was still
Hmm.
EMS. I was just promoted into the communications center. I
Okay.
have actually dealt with the OnStar dispatchers,
Oh,
and
okay.
we are going back quite a few years ago. And this was at the advent of phase two cell phones.
Okay.
So when you call 911, it gives you the longitude and latitude of that phone.
I
So
gotcha. Okay.
with our GIS system, I was
Hmm.
able to put the long and lat in and actually get a street address up
Oh,
to
okay.
within an eighth of a mile. Which, if you're thinking about it, eighth of a mile is not that far.
It's not, no. Especially if, yeah.
So I've sent ambulances, by request of OnStar.
Hmm.
Hey, we have someone. We're not exactly sure what's going on. Yep, no problem. Ambulance is already on its way. What's the long and lat?
Okay.
You know,
So we definitely do have the technology. I know a lot of
sure.
people, there's people out there that argue privacy and all that sort of stuff. But here's the deal. If you're driving drunk, right, and you shouldn't be, then it doesn't matter. Like you should have never gotten behind the wheel. If you're sleepy, driving sleepily, as long as you don't get in a wreck, I could be wrong, but it's not an offense. It's not like you can get arrested for it. Although I take that back. I think some states will still charge you driving impaired.
Yeah,
I could be
it
wrong.
could be, but that's going to be one of those. You know what, trooper? We'll see you in front of the judge.
Yeah, exactly. I know some states may have laws like that, but in the medical emergency has its own benefit. Like if I am having a medical episode while driving a vehicle, I would like the automation to be like, "Hey, this person needs help." Because one, I help is all already on the way because a lot of times when someone has seizures or passes out or something, have a medical issue at the wheel, they're not able to call for help. But also, if the technology is there to slow down the car and get it to a safe spot where I'm not going to hurt anybody else, that's even more beneficial.
And that's what it is. And to some of those people that say, "Oh, privacy, this, that, and the other thing," I'm telling you, in all seriousness, now everybody knows me as like the goofy guy and playing around and all that. as serious as I can tell you this, I've seen more than enough of my share of families ripped apart because of someone driving impaired. God forbid that's your family. Then what are you going to think?
That's yeah.
I don't wish
That's
any harm on anyone, but that is
no.
the brutal truth of life.
Well, and that's the thing is Tommy has a very unique perspective, being a EMT for 32 years, on the job for 32 years. So, and that's like a perspective that I don't have, and I don't ever want to have, right? Because that's something I don't want to ever have to experience. But yeah, I say in this instance, I think the safety outweighs the privacy concerns. Because ultimately, if you're
Absolutely.
concerned about privacy concerns, don't be doing something stupid in your car. You're supposed to be driving a car. That's what you're supposed to be doing.
And really, especially now with the
So
advent of Uber and Lyft and Mikey's
yeah,
car service and all that. It's an you name someone that ain't got a smartphone nowadays. It's an app.
yeah.
Push two buttons.
Done. Yep. And you can schedule it. So if you know you're going out to drink and you're like, I need to be home by this time, just schedule an Uber. It'll
That's it.
remind you. It's as simple as that.
And
So, but yeah,
don't buy the Uber driver a drink.
yeah, exactly. Don't offer to buy him a shot. So, but yeah, so that's I think that's moving in the right direction. I think the federal government's moving in the right direction with that, because that is something that we need to tack down on, is deaths caused by driver impairment. So, well,
Absolutely.
with that, going to a more lighter note, it's time to move on to our favorite segment of the show, jargon in a jiffy. So, jargon in a jiffy, for those of you that are new to the talk show, we do it every single show. Basically, Tommy and I both have careers where we have our own terms, our own definitions. Some say even our own language. So, the point of this game is we're supposed to help you learn about the terms and definitions of those terms in our career field. So the way the games work, or jargon in the jiffy works, is each one of us has a term that we pick out each week, and it's either from Tommy's career background or my career background. We will share the word with the other host. I will say it, or Tommy will say it in a sentence, and it's up to the other host to try to figure out what that word is. And then at the end, there's always an explanation to kind of describe what the word means and such, so you hopefully learn a new term. So let's see. So did you want to start off, Tommy?
No, no. How about you start off this week?
You want me to start? Okay.
Yeah.
This one, so the last two, I've kind of softballed it, Tommy. I was taking it easy. So today, I don't know. This one might be hard. It might not. I'm honestly not sure. So, it's not a term. It's more of a phrase for this week. Is walk me on. So walk me on is the phrase. So the term, or the sentence is, I was too busy hand flying the airplane, so I asked the captain to help walk me on to the final approach course.
Oh, okay. So right off the top of my head,
Hmm.
to walk you onto the final approach course, is it the captain actually giving you the vectoring and setting your heading and
Dang
your
it.
course?
Yes. Have I done that to you? Have I, when we were playing Flight Sim, have I walked you onto a
You did
course?
not call it that though, but I
Okay.
specifically remember one of our funnier shared flight decks. We were coming
Oh.
into Indianapolis
Oh,
when
Lord.
your first you froze, and I'm still
Yep.
going to final. We had that SkyWest 6-3 heavy, which was
Heavy. Yep.
hysterical. And just before you froze, though, I had seen you setting my course heading and my
Oh, that's
course
right.
knob, and then getting me
Okay.
ready to come in final. So all I had to do was shut down the autopilot and land the aircraft. That's literally all I did.
Man, yeah, spot on with that. So yeah, walking on is basically, it's, and I can walk myself on. And in that example, I said it was autopilot, but basically it's using. So let's say you're like cleared for the visual approach, and you're not quite at a point where you want to intercept, because we don't we can do traffic patterns in a transport category airplane, but realistically we're just vectoring ourselves around for an ILS is what it is. Um, and so when I walk myself on, it's using the heading bug, or it could be, I'm hand flying and the captain's helping me, but using the heading bug to keep the flight director synced to keep us walking onto the approach, almost like a constant rate of turn sometimes. But that's what we say. Hey, can you walk me on? So that's them helping out with the heading bug, getting you the headings onto the approach while you're trying to hand fly. Or like I said, I can do it with the autopilot on, where I'm like, hey, I'm just going to walk myself on final with this. And sometimes you do that if you know the localizer is a little wonky. Like 2.7 right in Chicago, if you're way the heck out there, you don't want to necessarily hit Vorlok or the arm the approach way out there, because it'll start fishing and doing this, trying to find the localizer. So sometimes you have to walk it on where you fly it onto the localizer with heading mode, and then engage autopilot to make sure that it's tracking the right localizer. So not engage the autopilot, but engage the approach mode from like LNAV or from heading mode into Vorlok. So that's it. I thought I was gonna hit a home run with that one, but good job, Tommy. Dang
That's
it.
actually kind of funny because that 2.7 right approach in Chicago,
Yeah.
that's what it does at 17 to 20 nautical miles east of the field.
Yep. It's
That they
what it
actually
does.
do it. It happens in the sim too, because I was in
Yeah.
the 170 and I started doing this. I'm like, what? Hey,
It's well, and fun fact, and that's because do you know how far out localizers are checked out to, technically speaking?
I thought it was somewhere around the 15-mile mark.
Close, 18 miles.
Okay,
So the localizer is 18 miles. The ones in O'Hare, I think, are technically flight checked out to 23. It's whatever the first bolded point on the approach, or the first point of the approach, is where they're flight checked to, which is about like 23 miles. But
I
yeah,
could
the
get that off the
standards.
approach plate.
Yeah, so if you look at the approach plate, so you got like Vogler in O'Hare, and then let's say
Yes,
28 Center, the first fix is Norma. And Norma is the first fix on the approach, so technically the localizer's been flight checked out to Norma.
that's
So I
funny
think
because
Norma is
Vogler was
23
my
miles.
first point.
So Vogler is the first transition fix for all of 28 Center, or all the 28 approaches from the east. That's where all the approaches start, is from Vogler. From the west is Gibbons. They all start from there. They're all like, it's a transition point to get onto the approaches. Um, Fun O'Hare knowledge there that you get for flying there for 7 years. But yeah, so it's flight checked out to 23 miles. Standard is 18. The localizer itself is only usable up to 10 miles. I want to say it's 10 degrees on either side, and the last eight, or yeah, the last eight is a little bit wider than that. What other random knowledge do I know about glide slopes? They're twice as sensitive as a VOR, and the actual beam, the glide slope beam, is only a 1/4 inch wide, if I remember correctly. It's very small. It's a super small radio signal that they send out there. But anyways, I digress. Those are some fun facts with Bill of the of aviation stuff. But anyways,
Fun
I
fact:
digress.
stuff Tommy's going to practice in the sim when he brings the baby guppy out.
There you go. Oh yeah, the seven. I love flying the 700. But anyways, I digress. Tommy, your turn. Let's talk
So
about your word.
my uh, word this week is buff. Very easy, buff.
Okay,
And here's the sentence for you. Bill, did you see the radio in that guy's car? He's really a buff.
he's really a buff.
Hmm?
Are you talking to like a history buff? Is it something similar? Like
No,
he's an old
no, but
school.
you're there. Well,
Um.
take a couple more forward steps there. You're on the right path,
So
definitely.
he said, sorry, say the sentence one time. So look at his radio. He's really a
Look at the radios in his car. This guy's really a buff.
in his car. Are you talking about like
His personal
ambulance?
vehicle.
He's a buff. He's like a radio head. Is that kind of like the
Y-
basic? So like an a enthusiast, or like an enthusiast of
There
some
you
sort.
go. There you go.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. There you are. For your industry, they're called
Yeah.
av geeks.
Oh, I gotcha.
But
So
yeah,
okay.
someone who may or may not have anything to do with emergency services, but he's listening to our radio channels, taking pictures of our
Oh,
scenes.
aren't those
Like,
called stingers too? The guys
yes,
that go and
and
take
it's a
pictures.
regional thing. In New York City and Long Island, they're known as
Mm-hmm.
buffs. In northeastern Pennsylvania, they're known as whackers.
Whackers.
It's all relative to
Oh,
where you're on the job. But yeah, that's it. And
interesting. Yeah, because down south or in the Midwest, we call them stingers.
yep.
So
And it was kind
yeah,
of funny when I was working in Florida. We had walked into a Dunkin', my partner and I,
mhm.
and this young man jumped like he couldn't get out from behind the counter quick enough to come shake our hands. Like, oh, I listen to you guys all the time, this, that, and the other thing. And I literally had nothing because it's happened to me in the past, and you just kind of you'd be cordial with them.
Yeah.
They're meeting an
It's like plane
EMT and a
spotters.
medic, and they're
Yeah.
and like meanwhile, like 5 years into my career, I'm like, bro, if you want my EMT card and my off duty shield, here you go. you
Yeah, yeah,
know,
just go have it. Yeah.
and then it totally slipped. I shook the kid's hand. I looked and was like, well, it's always nice to meet a fan.
Oh my god, Tommy. That's how I mean. That's and if you think about it, that's kind of how plane spotters are with pilots. Well, in pilots in general, and I fail to realize this because this is my 9 to 5. I tell Tommy this, and Tommy we talked about it last week too. He's like, I'm realizing that being an airline pilot, it's still a job, and it is. It 100% is. It becomes,
Albeit
you know,
really
I,
cool job.
it's a cool job, yeah. But I do go in every week. Like I did this last week. I almost did the exact same trip as I did the week previously. But so I often lose grasp of how cool it is of what I do until someone comes up and is really nice. Because I've had this a couple times in O'Hare, especially where people recognize me and come up and talk to me, and then it hits me because a lot of them are like younger pilots who are like flight instructing or working their way through the regionals, and to hear the excitement in their voice, seeing what it's like to be at the majors, it makes me realize that how cool of a job I have. And so I kind of understand where that's from because at first you're just like, oh, thanks for being a fan. I think that's hilarious. But yeah, so yeah, down south in the Midwest we call them stingers. I was considering it doing here because you could make some serious money by selling shots and stuff to the local news and stuff, but it's just not. It's too much extra time. It's a lot of sitting on the scanner and trying not to get in the way of bad scenarios and stuff like that. So didn't really take up to it, but yeah, we have them down here. They're called stingers. So
Yeah, and I don't. I try not to crush the enthusiasm. It
you
it's
should see the first couple episodes of Career Corner. That's crushing their enthusiasm.
well, yeah, you got to get the brutal truth out of the way first. Everyone
Tell me
should know
about
what
ducking
door they're
behind.
walking through. But
Yeah, Tommy talked about ducking behind bulletproof engine blocks and such on
yeah,
episode 2.
you know, and it's there. Like I've signed a couple autographs in my day.
Have
Um,
you really?
yeah, yeah. There
Nice.
was one real quick specifically. We were at a second alarm house fire when I was working in Queens, and we were
Tommy's out there signing autographs while the building's
yeah,
burning.
and it was busy. There were people burnt, and like we were working. The fire department was
Yeah.
working. It was very very busy. And this kid was 5, maybe 6 years old, and he had a pad and a pen, and he is running around to everyone asking for their autograph. Now, mind you, we are just post September 11th. This
Okay.
this was, I believe, like later October of
Okay.
2001. So
Mhm.
he's going around. I'm like, kid, you're gonna get hurt, man. You got to go. You just go stand over there. And finally, one of our lieutenants was there. I was like, see that short guy right there? And the kid was like, yeah, go ask him, man. We're really
Yeah,
really
we're
busy.
we're busy. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
like 3.5 hours later, as everything's starting to wind down, the fire department's starting to clean up. He comes around again, right? And I'll never forget him. The little kid's name was Jamal, and he was a very polite young man. So he comes up, hey, I'm like, you know what? You are one of the most tenacious people I ever met. I'm going to do one better for you. So I went over to the battalion chief. I went over to the police sergeant. I'm like, this kid has been looking for our autographs this entire time. Can we do a little something for him? So we went up. We got his parents. They brought out their camera. The kid took pictures on the fire engine, in the ambulance, on the police car. Like we made this kid's day. It just, you
And
know,
that's why we do it. We're
yeah,
the thing is we're not reminded of how cool our jobs are until someone like that comes up and they're like, "Hey, what you do is so cool." I always appreciate it, always. So
yeah, yeah. It's pretty cool.
yeah. So, well, thanks, Tommy. That was a good jargon at Jiffy. Tommy and I both. They were fairly hard terms, but Tommy was able to knock it out of the park, and I got close. I wasn't as good as Tommy. Tommy just just no pun intended, walked it right on. So good job, Tommy. All right, so up next is going to be Career Corner. Career Corner is where Tommy and I talk about our careers and the building blocks to get to our careers. So if you go back to our previous episodes, so this is episode number 11. So if you go back to the previous 10 episodes, each episode we progressively talk about the different steps you need to get into our career fields and how to be successful. So for example, I started off with the discovery flight in episode number 1, and Tommy started out with the how to apply and how to get into the EMT field, medical field early on. So now we are on episode 11, a little bit further down the progressive line, and Tommy is going to talk to you today about, I believe we're on, is it week 8 this time, Tommy? That sound about right?
Yeah.
Training? Yeah.
Yeah, week 8. It's
Week
week 8.
8? Okay. So Tommy's going to be talking about week 8 of EMT training, which includes hazmat and vehicular rescue. Go ahead and take it away, Tommy.
Thanks, Phil. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to week 8. And this week, us as instructors, we're going to give you guys a little bit of a break. We're going to give you some fun stuff to do. So the first couple of days, every EMT has to have hazmat awareness level training. It's mandatory by the federal government. It's mandatory by all 50 states. So you're going to get it, and you're going to get headaches, and you're going to be extremely bored. So get the espresso shots in your Dunkin' or your whatever the high level of caffeine is for Starbucks, because this is going to be a long 2 days. We teach you how to read the ERS guide. We teach you how to identify different hazards as far as it comes to hazmat. The ERG guide, everyone has seen tractor trailers on the highways and on streets where they have the placards. We teach you actually how to read and interpret that placard to know what is on that truck, up to including, yes, boys and girls, a little bit of nuclear contaminant. So it's very long. It's very dry. Again, I've tried to make this exciting, and no, it just didn't happen. But once you get through it, there's no test in this. There's a little general knowledge exam, but I'm telling you, there's no pass-fail grade on it. We just want you to make sure that you learn 2 things: how to read those placards, how to properly seal off hazardous material. Uphill, upwind, things like that will all be in. And then the rule of thumb, which means if you could see the scene beyond the portion of your thumb, you're way too close. Back it off a little bit and you'll be good. The second portion of the week will actually end up on a Saturday. This is a rare week to where you will actually have a Saturday class. We try not to impede too much on the weekends unless it's a weekend course. But for what the vehicular rescue is, Saturday is necessary. Depending on where you are and who your trainer is, generally the local mechanics and junkyards always have vehicles around that they're stripping for parts or anything like that, who donate them to EMT classes. And the night before the class, it's pretty funny because you see the tow truck drivers out there actually staging a car accident for us with these vehicles. The only thing that we do ask is that the vehicles are intact. Doesn't necessarily even have to have an engine in it. We just need the exterior of the vehicle and the roof to be intact, because we're going to put mannequins in those vehicles and we're going to simulate that they're pinned in the vehicles. And we're going to have local fire departments, local police departments come out. They're physically going to use their pneumatic tools and their saws and everything. They're going to show you what it is actually like to rescue someone pinned in a vehicle. They're going to take the hood off. They're going to use the jaws of life and pop the doors, as we call it. They're going to cut the A-frames, which are the 2 downward beams that hold your windshield in. They're going to cut those. They're going to roll the roof. They're going to roll the dashboard forward. And it's very, very intricate. You wouldn't think it, like using these huge pneumatic tools, but these guys are really, really good. They're total professionals with it. I personally have been in a vehicle that they've had to cut people out of, as we say in the thing. And it gets you to used to the noises, because it's really, really different to hear that metal creaking, to hear the pneumatic cutters just cut through, the metal in the car. And what thought goes into it, with the fire department when they approach, like, oh, wow, we got a 1967 Chevy Impala right here. This is all metal. This is what we're going to do. As opposed to, hey, this is a 2020 Nissan that's like 95% fiberglass and composite. because there is a difference on how they cut it and pressures and stuff like that. But it's a very, very interesting, especially if you haven't been exposed to something like that, to watch how actually all three services will work together to rescue one person, two people. Doesn't matter the amount of people, but how we'll gain access, how EMS will actually start treating someone while they're in that vehicle pinned. And, you know, we won't do it in training, have someone in the vehicle while that's happening because the liability is too much. Like, not even the instructors go in, but, the proper protective gear, like, your helmet and your turnout coat and stuff like that, that you got to wear. But it's a pretty cool course. I actually still enjoy it. I get a little buffy about it, only because I know what's going on behind the scenes, and I kind of rib the firemen because that's just always a good time. But so with that, we're actually ending up the week on that note. And generally, the instructors all loop together 15-20 bucks, and we buy you guys pizza and sodas. So it's all a good time. It's an eye opener. It's a learning experience. And if you were unsure if you wanted to continue with the course from here on, because next week we go back into the more didactic and classroom environment, this class will be like, yep, I'm doing it just so I could see this in real life once. So with that, Bill, we're rounding off the week.
You know what? That's awesome that you mentioned that the vehicular rescue. So I did something similar. So in college, I was an RA, or a resident assistant, and in my junior year, or excuse me, my senior year, I was what's called a community director, which is second in command of a residential building, and I'm part of the like the different programs and activities that they have for the residents there. I kind of oversee it all. So for the freshmen, our first program as community directors, we had what's called elevator speed dating, right? And so basically, it's an icebreaker. It was the first month that they were there in college, these freshmen, and we would put them in the elevators, and each floor they would have to answer questions or icebreaker questions about one another before the door closes, basically. So you get to know the people in your building. But because it was me, community director, there was a twist to it, right? Because we also needed to, there has to be an educational aspect to our program, at least at Florida Tech there was. So it was actually speed dating with the twist. So they would go all the way to the top, they would answer, and then one of our RAs that was in the elevator, really good, I mean, brilliant actor. I didn't realize that he was that good until this. He would start reenacting the sounds and basically telling the people, well, the night's taking a turn. You guys had too much drink. You guys are in a vehicle, and then suddenly bing bang boom, and then the doors open on the second floor of the building, and it's all dark, and there's basically like candle lights, like almost like a vigil leading you down another hall. And then we had this one of our RAs was like this 6'5" guy from where was he from? I think he was from no, he was from South Africa. His name was Thor, huge guy, and we dressed him up like the Grim Reaper. So he just stood there in the elevator and just pointed down the hallway, right? And so it took people down. There were sounds of like sirens and stuff like that, and basically guided them down this back stairwell. And when they emerged from the building, there was a mock car crash. We worked with local fire departments and paramedics to stage a fake car crash, like a drunk driver car crash. And they were awesome because we had comms with them, and we would tell them, all right, this group is out, and they weren't already set up. They would come rushing down the street like they were arriving on scene. So we tell them, hey, everybody's in place, and they come screaming in, and they did extractions, and we had a couple RAs playing victims that we did makeup on. And it was awesome. And they did it a couple times throughout the night, and then they would talk to the kids the freshmen, about the safety of drunk driving and stuff like that. It was phenomenal. And that was our first program. And our residents were like, holy crap, this is pretty serious. And it's like, yeah, you had a good time getting to know one another, but we're also getting an important message across to you about the importance of being safe if you're going to be drinking. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's exactly what it was. They were demonstrating like the jaws of life. They were doing extractions, medical procedures. Even had the local police there pretending to do a sobriety test on one of our resident assistants that was the driver. And it's as morbid as it sounds. It is a lot of fun to put together. It's a lot of fun to be a part of, because it's just amazing when everything comes together. It's a lot of moving parts to get going, and then to see it happen live is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Oh yeah, especially when when you're on the inside of it, and you'd
Mhm.
be like, all right, we want this as real, close to real world
Yeah.
as
Mhm.
possible. I mean, I've run these classes to
Mhm.
literally, um, one of the tow trucks brought the night before while we're out there because you got
Mhm.
to sign for the donation.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, like the front end was totaled on one vehicle, and he T-boned and he placed it perfectly to look like he T-boned the vehicle. And so like the crumple zones
Wow.
were all, oh yeah, we'll go above and beyond.
I'm
You
trying
know,
to I'm trying to think if I still I had a GoPro during that. I'm trying to think if I
I
still
would
have it.
if you still have that footage, I would love to see that.
I don't know if I do. I'll try to find it, Tommy. I will, and I'll send it to you, and maybe I'll post it if I just can't remember if I where I would have had it. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, so it's just a lot of it's good information, a good way to get a very important point across, basically, and it's
Yes,
good
it is.
training when you're actually interacting with like equipment and stuff as well. So sorry, we definitely went off on a tangent there. It's just Tommy mentioned the mock crash, and I just immediately went back to what was that 2015 when I did it because that was hands down one of the best programs I'd ever run. So more of a tangent, real quick, because Tommy lived in Florida. I went to school in Florida. We'll take a little tangent train here. My friend and I were both community directors at the time. Every year there's what's called FRAS, or the Florida Resident Assistant Seminar. It's this huge conference where different schools send a group of RAs to present and stuff like that. And we were selected to present ours, which was called F5 programming, which is a programming model that takes a step out of the traditional model to create more effective programming. And my friend and I presented that to a different people. I think we presented, was it once? I can't remember if it was once or twice, but we presented to the whole to a group of RAs from all across the state. And at the end, there was an award ceremony where, based off the comments and the feedback we got from the people we presented to, they ranked the presentations. And if I remember correctly, we were top three or top two. I can't remember. So my buddy and I, we were top two programmers in the state of Florida. For that sort of thing. So it was, and that was the first program I did after going and getting that award, and that was based off that model of programming. So it's goes down as one of my favorite and probably most well, or what's the proper word, most well pulled off
Yeah, I got
programs that I've ever done. So I'm definitely gonna go find it because it is good, and I made a really good video of it. I just can't remember where it is, so I'll dig through that and try to figure that out. So thanks, Tommy, for week number 7 of the career corner there of EMT training, and I took us on a tangent. And now for an even bigger tangent, I'm just kidding. I'm going to take us on a little journey called airline training. So, as you can remember, last week we talked about week number 2. Give me just a second here. Sorry, folks. My dogs are just going nuts in the corner there. But today we are talking about basically the second step of airline training. Last week we talked about the first week, which was the airline indoctrination, which is anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks about learning about the company. Now you have that done. You've got your training schedules. So the next step in airline training is going to be your systems training. So systems training basically has to do a lot with the specifics of the airplane, because when you're an airline pilot, especially at like a regional or something like that, you're only flying one type of airplane. So they want you to know that airplane and its systems inside and out. So they'll break it down by systems. So it'll be like pneumatics and pressurization, fire protection, detection and protection, landing gear systems, was it rain removal and anti-ice, de-ice system, stuff like that. They'll break it down into modules so you learn each system specifically. Now, at the end of that, most AQP programs have a test of some sort, which is called a knowledge validation. It is a written test, multiple choice usually, that demonstrates or evaluates your ability or evaluates your knowledge of the systems test or the systems. So you go through the weeks. It's usually anywhere about a week to 2 weeks of training for systems, and then you take that test, and then you get signed off for the next phase, which will be procedures validation, which we'll talk about, or procedures, which we'll talk about next week. So the next step after your in-doc is going to be systems. So you're going to do about 2 weeks or so of systems, maybe a week depending on the aircraft and the airline training program. And then you're going to take a test called a knowledge validation, which just validates your knowledge on the systems of the aircraft that you are going to fly. So luckily, I took us off on a tangent. So that way, I took a little bit longer on Tommy's segment because we were talking a little about vehicular stuff, but Career Corner on my end was just a little bit simpler. So with that being said, we're going to move over to a viewer Q&A here. We'll see if we have anything from our viewers. So just as a reminder, if you guys are watching the show, you guys can ask live questions. We'll answer them in this segment. If you have a question after the fact that you want us to answer on the live show, you can go to our Discord and check out our 3 Green Simulations group. Just scan it here at the bottom, or you can go to the link of any of our bios on any of our social media, and the link is in there as well. I believe Tommy actually had a question from Snowy in my live chat. He was talking about the second alarm fire. So what is a second alarm fire? A fire is what Snowy's asking, because he doesn't know.
Okay, so most fire departments now use an alarm system, Snowy. When the fire is more intense, and it doesn't necessarily mean what you see as physical fire. Heat has a lot to do with it as well. The first alarm, you might get 2 engines, a tower ladder, battalion chief, an ambulance, multiple cop cars for traffic and crowd control, and things like that. So now when the fire itself either grows or it gets too hot and you need additional resources, over the radio, they'll be like, second alarm it, or they'll strike the bell, as they call it. That will dispatch additional resources, more engine companies, a RIT team, which is the rapid interventions team. So God forbid a fireman goes down. These are the trained firemen that are going to go running right in there. For FDNY specifically, engines are RIT teams, but they also will have a rescue truck coming. And these are the guys that have been firemen for years that have very specialized training, confined space rescue, rope rescue, things along that nature. So the higher the alarm is, the worse that fire is. Like I've been up to 5 alarm fires that easily, and this was in New York, you're looking at maybe a half dozen to a dozen ambulances, 200 or 300 firemen, not including command staff, multiple pieces of apparatus, and 20, 25 different lengths of hose, all charged and working at the time. So that's basically the difference between alarms.
Okay. Is there a maximum alarm? Is it like
In
5
New
the
York
maximum?
City, it's known as Condition Omega. When they call Condition Omega, you're looking at a
Really?
September 11th type of
Ooh,
response, where
wow.
all available are dispatched. The MARS, the mutual aid radio system, kicks in. Now,
Yep.
generally from upstate and Long Island, they backfill and actually do the 911 calls in the city.
Okay.
And mandatory recall of all off-duty personnel.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, Snowy, it is a level of severity thing. So if you hear a 5 alarm fire, that means it's
It's going to be
it's
bad.
it's bad. It's bad. That's why there's 5 alarm chili, because 5 alarm chili is really freaking hot, right? That's the
Yes,
same.
yes, it is.
That's where that comes from. I learned that. So one day eating some buffalo wings, I'm like, why are they called 5 alarm? And then I found out very, very shortly after. So unfortunately, let's see. I don't have any comments or questions on my side, Tommy. Other than that, do you?
No, not at all. Just a bunch of people saying hello. So hello, everybody. Happy to see you.
Hello, everybody. Awesome. Well, that will give us enough time here to transition to our discussion topic of the week. As some of you may or may not know, every week we do a random discussion topic, and it has nothing to do with our career fields necessarily or torque and throw. It's just a general discussion topic. Tommy and I met in November and set the topics of discussion for this month. We're going to be doing the same thing for next month. So it's just a random topic. So this week in our talk show, we're going to be talking about ugly sweaters. Although this isn't ugly. This is pretty cool. I like this one. This one is pretty
Yeah,
sick. This
yeah,
is
I
my
got to agree. The Star Wars
endorsement.
nerd says, yeah, that's just a cool sweater.
But here's the thing: a lot of people back in the day, and I'll go into the history. I did some research. We'll talk about the history of the ugly sweater. But this is considered technically an ugly Christmas sweater, even though it is awesome. So we'll get into that. But first, I want to ask Tommy, because Tommy is not wearing one. Tommy, do you do ugly sweaters? Is that a
I do
thing?
not. I do not. Tommy is not a sweater guy at all. I
Really?
did.
But you live in the Northeast. Like I figure, because these are warm, they're comfortable.
They are, but, and this is, I've only owned 2 sweaters. Well, I mean, through high school, I had sweaters and stuff like that, and I think that's what gave me a distaste for them. When I was on the job in New York, I had 2 sweaters, and they were the, military officer-looking sweaters, and back in the day, they were called the woolly pulleys,
Oh yeah, the
and
submarine captain ones,
yep,
the
and
U-boat
then,
571 ones.
yep, we went to, fleece job shirts after that, and it's a comfort thing. Like,
Okay.
I couldn't stand wearing a jacket when I was in the ambulance unless it was raining because you're in and out, and you get snagged on it, and because why would you zip up your jacket when you could just leave it wide open in the middle of the winter because you're layered up? But
Okay,
yeah,
I can see that. I'm so
I
surprised though. You being from the Northeast and from being from Queens, I figured, sweaters and cold versus me being from El Paso. You know, it's completely different worlds. I grew up basically not ever wearing these, and I love these now. So
oh sure, but I did growing up, because let's face it, we all have that point in life where our parents dress us and we have absolutely no say in what we're wearing,
none
and it
whatsoever.
was just progression through the years. Having a better half that's anemic, the apartment's normally a little bit warmer than when someone else would.
Gotcha.
Um, and I've always just been a jeans and t-shirt type of guy.
You wouldn't. I
Yeah,
would have never guessed.
yeah, right. But yeah, it just sweaters aren't me. Fleeced hoodies is where it's at for me. That's pretty much how I go through the entire winter.
Well, now that I think of it, when we met up for lunch in Harrisburg, it was cold and rainy, and you definitely just showed up
In
in
t-shirt.
t-shirts and
Yeah,
jeans, like no problem. So
yeah,
that
and I
makes
was like
sense.
perfectly comfortable.
Yeah, that totally makes sense now. Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think of when I started because I didn't wear these when I was younger. Because I was afraid I was gonna get bullied for them. And also it was El Paso, so it was generally warm. I want to say the first one I ever got is the one that Schultz is wearing. With Santa Claus back there with the rocking on a guitar, and I think it was actually in 20. Oh, was it 2017? I did that because our flight school where I was flight instructing, where I was having a Christmas party. I'm like, well, if I'm going to a Christmas party, I gotta have an ugly sweater, right? I gotta
There
have
you
a
go.
Christmas sweater, and I think that's where that started. So ironically, where my ugly sweater tradition started was in Florida, of all places, in 2017 for a Christmas party. I don't. I mean, it does. Don't get me wrong. It does get cold in Florida. Nowhere near as cold as anywhere else in the United States, but it does get cold. That's where it started, and then every year I just try to get a new. I haven't got a new one this year. So, but last week you saw my straight out of North Pole one, and then this is my Darth Vader one. I love this one. This one is so cool. I saw it, and I'm like, I gotta have that. There's no question.
Absolutely.
I have to have that. So, but let's talk a little bit about the history of it, right? Once again, a huge history buff, huge history nerd right now. So I love researching to figure out where these things came from because there's a lot of weird traditions out there that it's just like, where did this come from? For example, I heard a kid the other day, yesterday we were in Walmart, and they're selling the Christmas, I think it's Christmas Story leg lamps as Christmas decorations. And ooh,
That's
fragile
hysterical.
must be Italian. And this kid's like, how's that a Christmas decoration? And I just looked at my wife and I was like, this kid has no idea. The
Nope.
kid has no idea where this comes from. None. So it's stuff it's stuff like that where I think it's kind of important for us to kind of reflect and learn where certain things came from. Just like when we talked about bankrupt or discount or bankruptcy, I believe that was episode 8. We were talking about the history of Black Friday and how actually Black Friday had nothing to do with November or Thanksgiving or merchants. It actually had to do with the stock market crash back in the 1800s and on September 24th because of I believe it was Jim Gould and Jay Fisk, some greedy guys that were trying to buy up all the gold and
Yep.
stuff to drive up the prices. So that's why I like talking about this stuff because it's interesting to learn about the history of these sort of things. So this article is coming from CNN. Called Ugly Christmas Jumpers, basically. This all started with Christmas themed pullovers, started making an appearance in the 1950s, a nod perhaps to the holiday growing commercialization. They were initially referred to as Jingle Bell sweaters because, like my sweater I had on last week's show, it was jingling all the time. Notice this one doesn't have the jingle jangles on it, and that's just because I didn't want to be jingling throughout the entire show like I was last time, because that kind of is annoying. Comedic, but annoying to me. But that's what they were originally called with the Jingle Bell sweaters because they had jingle bells on them, like pom poms and all sorts of stuff to make them look obnoxious. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the item actually hit the mainstream, and the shift came thanks to a pop culture and comedies with a goofball dad characters like Chevy Chase in the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Absolute freaking classic of a
Love that
movie.
movie.
It's awesome, but that's where it started to become more popular because you're starting to see them in movies like that. Which National Lampoon's Vacation is a comedy, so it was still meant as kind of satirical, as kind of a comedic thing. But that's when they started coming on, started catching on. But they so in 1980s, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't alive then. But 1980s is when they started it. It started and then it lost. According to the article, it lost popularity in the 1990s, but then made a comeback in the early 2000s, specifically noting a Christmas sweater party in British Columbia, Canada in 2002 is when the first documented Christmas sweater party happened. And that started when they started becoming more mainstream, where it was like embracing the goofiness of an ugly sweater and turning it into a party theme. And then in 2002, there was a UK charity called Save the Children launched, a Christmas jumper, which is their weird way of saying sweater, Christmas jumper day, catching the attention of the world. So that was like a big thing because it became a national like day for people to dress up like this. And that's how from there it just gained popularity. Excuse me. Excuse me. So it just gained popularity. So from there, people like Taylor Swift, Kanye West, even Jimmy Fallon on his show has a segment called the 12 Days of Ugly Sweaters or something like that. So that's where it just kind of gained traction and into the thing that we know now, which kind of explains why I didn't do it when I was younger, because realistically, it didn't really catch on until post 2012. So the 2000 teen years, which is when I got my first sweater, in college, which is now on Schultz the Skeleton behind me. So it's actually more fairly recent that the ugly sweater has become more popular in the past decade or so. So it hasn't been a huge thing. So growing up, Tommy, was it a huge thing? Do you remember a time where people were just like rocking out ugly sweaters?
Not necessarily like family Christmas parties. I mean, there was
Hmm.
always that one uncle, but it wasn't necessarily an ugly Christmas sweater. I mean, generally, I date back to
Was
the
it?
Argyle sweaters. you
I
know,
was just say, was it a knit sweater? Was it like this?
yeah,
They were.
yeah, it was definitely knit sweaters. It just wasn't ugly. From what I
Gotcha.
remember, one of the first ugly Christmas, um, phew, it was the late '90s, and believe it or not, it was at an FBI field office that I
Of
was actually
course.
on. Yeah,
Of
I
course.
was actually on a call in an FBI field office, and there is a big field office in Queens, and
That's
they had
funny.
him on, which I
They had
just
them
thought
on.
was hysterical. But that's really my memory. But like family wise, no, because being brought up the way was, you know, later on in life, I went to parties and stuff like that, and then but the family get-togethers, no, not really. And I do remember seeing people sporadically in like the malls Christmas shopping with them on.
Yeah. Hmm.
What seemed to be more popular, citing Christmas Vacation again, was the
Hmm.
away Chicago Blackhawk 00 Griswold jersey. I see those all over the
Yeah.
place.
But nowadays kids are gonna be like, "What's that?" Just like the leg at the leg lamp at Walmart. All the
Yeah,
kids are like, and all the adults are going, "Oh, that's funny," and the kids are like, "What? Why is that
yeah,
funny?"
and they have
You know?
no clue.
No clue whatsoever. So, does anybody in your family now do it? Does your significant other do it, or
My
do you have
son,
anybody? Your
my
son does it,
son,
really?
my 21-year-old son, soon to be
The one in
22, he
Florida?
does it. The one in Florida, yeah.
Dude, it must be a Florida thing because that's where I got mine. That's where I started mine was in Florida.
Well, even living down there was a couple of winters where I actually thought about putting a jacket on. Didn't,
Yeah,
but
it
I
does get
thought
cold.
about it. It's so different. Like here where I am now, it's a much drier cold.
It
It'll
is.
chap your lips,
Yeah,
it dries your nose out, it hurts your throat if you're running and you're breathing through your mouth.
yeah.
Down there, it is just a wet cold, and that's so different.
It is. And it's also in the Midwest too. It's more moist because we get a lot from where I live. We get a lot of moisture from the Gulf, and then up north you got the Great Lakes too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely different. So yeah, maybe there is a link between moist. I love saying moist because that upsets so many people. Moist winter. Let me say it one more time. Moist, moist, moist. If you don't like me saying it, you should follow us. No. It's maybe there is a difference. Maybe there is something having to do with the moist winter that causes it. Because like I said, I did it in Florida too. So maybe there's some hidden link in Florida. Maybe it's because Christmas sweaters are so out of place normally in Florida. That's why there's such an in thing in Florida.
Well, also too, you got to remember we are in snowbird season. Everybody leaves the Northeast and heads down to Florida,
There you go.
till roughly Easter,
I
just
you
to
know
escape.
I need to do some. I can't believe I didn't look up that statistic. I'll look up that statistic and post it on our Twitter. About how many people north versus south have more, or I guess a poll about ugly sweaters and see who wears them more. Because it'd be interesting if the north does more. But you're right. There's a ton of people that go down to Florida during the
Mhm.
winter, the snowbirds, that may have brought that culture down to the south.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy to look into. I'm gonna have to look into that
Yeah,
after
the
the
same
show.
reason. Why are there two hockey teams in the state of Florida? Bunch of people from the north missed the game.
That's true. You got the Lightning and you got the Panthers. That is
Yep.
very true. Mm-hmm. Or is it Cougars? No, it's Panthers.
No, it's the
It is
Panthers.
Panthers.
Florida
The West Palm
Panthers.
Beach Panthers. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So, but that is a good point. I will have to do research. So stay tuned on our Twitter, y'all, at Torque and Thrust TS, which I'll get into here in a second as we close the show. But I'll be posting that information on there because that is something I'm very curious about. Is statistically speaking, if it's more people wear these in the north versus the snowbirds that come down and have brought that culture to Florida. Because you're 100% right. There are a ton of snowbirds in Florida
Yeah.
during this time of year. So good point, Tommy. Now I got to do some more research, but we'll save that. We'll like I said, I'll post it on Twitter. Maybe talk about it next show. But that for now, that concludes episode number 11 of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, the Striped Sweater. We do thank you all for joining us and hope you've enjoyed the talk show. If you want to stay up to date with the show and industry news, follow us on Twitter at Torque in Thrust Talk Show. It's all in the ticker tape below. The handle is at Torque, the letter N, so Torque in Thrust TS. Torque in Thrust TS is where you can find us on Twitter. If you'd like to save the show for on-the-go entertainment and news, follow and turn on notifications for the talk show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Feel free to follow me and Tommy on YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok at Captain Bill Official, and Tommy is at Level Flight Simulations. We will be live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Kick next week on Saturday, December 23rd, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, and we are going to be discussing Christmas traditions from around the world. With that, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, I am Bill.
I am Tommy.
And thank you all, and we will see you next week on what will be our final show of the season.